All right. I'm so excited about this.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve and Michelle Robbins, the Farmington's power couple is what I'll call you guys.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
Yeah. No, jokes aside, I've been sincerely super excited to be able to pick your guys' brain. Michelle knows the podcast for me was an idea years and years ago. And we were on a Zoom call, 2021 or something like that. And I was just floating the idea out here. And I was like, when I do it, you've got to come on as a guest. It'd be so fun to pick your brain. And, now here we are 66 episodes later, 5 years later, and I'm finally getting to talk to the Robbins. But for everybody listening, Steve and Michelle, you guys are the founders and the owners of Robbins Heating and Air Conditioning in Farmington. And I'm so excited for so many different levels. But I've had the pleasure of getting to work with you guys in the past on several different projects. And I'm one of those guys that I observe, things when we're working together. And it's been really fun for me to be able to pay attention to how you guys have built a business that has grown in such a significant and meaningful way to be what I would consider a large player, but while also maintaining your quality and your customer service and like the essence of who you are. And that's really the gist of what I'm so excited to pick your guys' brains about is how in the world you've built this thing and, all of that stuff. And then obviously I'm excited to talk about the dynamics of, husband and wife and business partners and we'll see where it goes from there. But all of that to say, thank you both so much for being here and for making the drive and super excited. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, our pleasure, I'm sure. Not just
I think it's going to be fun
as well.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. Where I'd love to start, and maybe Steve, if you don't mind, because I know you were kind of one of the things I've been really fascinated with when I've been able to have conversations with business owners are people that have turned a very niche skill set or, somebody who's learned a trade or a skill or something like that, and then turned that into a business. Because there's entrepreneurs, I feel like, and then there's, I'll call you a tradesman, but somebody with a skill that they've learned. That then entrepreneurship sort of came afterwards, and I'm always fascinated when people have been able to successfully do that. I'd love to hear from you. Walk me through how Robbins started. Walk me through the early days of when you've learned the trade already, and you start to think maybe we should go out on our own. Walk me through that window of time.
Well, I think that even started just before we even got married. I think that was one of the reasons why Michelle married me is because I said I wanted to own a business someday, right? So obviously, starting out in the trades, my dad was a mechanic. And so I always enjoyed working with my hands, not on cars, but I like working with my hands. And my dad was very blue collar. If something needed to be built at the house or done, we did it. We didn't hire it out. We did all of it. And so concrete, drywall, you name it. We did it all. So starting in the trades was fun for me because I wasn't one that wanted to go to school. After high school, I was done. I didn't want to go.
I don't blame you.
I didn't know I want to go do anything else, So
if it weren't for football, I would have been done too.
Yeah. So going into the trades was a pretty good option for me. And I didn't know what HVAC was, right, when I started into it. But fast forward, I worked for a local company for about 4.5 years. After Michelle and I got married, it kind of that gas got put on of let's go ahead and do this. Let's break out and do something. So that's kind of how that kind of just got started.
You knew that early on that you wanted to be a business owner?
I knew at trade school.
Really?
So I went, so my cousin and I went to trade school together, and we talked about it back in 1998 when we were sitting there at UTI in Phoenix, right? We both of us wanted, and he owns his own business in Gallup, New Mexico. So early on back then, for some reason, we just thought, it'd be a good idea.
Right. So cool. So graduated high school, went straight to trade school.
Correct.
And then when's the timeline of Michelle and the marriage, and how does that, is that right after?
So I graduated high school in 98 and went straight to Phoenix. Went to a trade school. It was about a 10, 11-month course. And then I came back, and we met late 2002.
Okay, so 4 years.
Good thing I got that right.
So yeah. Otherwise I'd be in trouble. But at the time you're still relatively new. You're still working for that other company.
Correct.
When you guys had met, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you got married and started a company the same year?
Close.
Within the
Really?
same 12 months, yes. Well, actually, it
It was 9 months later.
9 months later.
Wow. Yeah, you guys don't mess around.
No.
It's so funny. I've always gotten along with you guys so well because there's all these like parallels with our stories always. But my wife and I, people thought we were crazy because we closed on our first house on a Wednesday. We got married that Friday.
You're like,
Like
no,
we were
it's
like,
a thing.
we're doing
in.
this,
Yeah.
you know. So, okay, so within a year of meeting each other, or with marriage, the business started of meeting.
So
Okay.
we were married December of 2002 and started our business September of 2003.
Wow, awesome.
So we were a go.
And okay, well now we're going to pivot to that already. So what came first, formal business partnership or marriage? Like, were you officially part of the business when
No,
it
so
founded?
marriage came first.
Okay.
And then the business.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was actually 17 when we met, and I was a senior in high school. And I played volleyball with Steve's sister, and she was like, "You need to go on a date with my brother." I'm like, "He is so old, but also really good looking. Yes, I will go on a date with him."
Fine. Twist my arm, right?
But I had made this list of 5 things that I wasn't going to date any more boys unless they had these 5 things. Like, boys are dumb. At that age, I was in that mind frame of, they're dumb unless they check this list. I'm not doing it. Well, the very next date I went on after making this list was with Steve Robbins.
No way.
So as we're going, and the first one was he had to be extremely hot, right? That's the language you use at 17.
Right.
Yeah. Check. Okay. Wow. Super handsome. He had to be taller than me, and I'm really tall. I'm 5'11". So I was like, oh, this will never happen.
This is like
boy
a
doesn't
very
exist.
exclusive list. Yeah.
We had to be the same religion. He couldn't live with his parents. That was the 4th rule. And the number 5 was he wanted to own his own business one day.
No way.
So after 2 weeks of dating, and the 5th box got checked off, I'm like,
You're in
oh
trouble.
no, this was not supposed to happen. I'm a kid. Anyways, so 59 days later, we got married.
Wow.
During my senior Christmas break.
Right.
Was when we got married.
When you
She
know,
was
you
18
know.
though.
Yeah.
What's
I
that?
did turn 18 in that time frame.
Yeah,
So
for the
that was
record,
helpful.
yeah, she was 18.
2 days,
Yes,
she was 18.
but it was all
Yeah.
And looking
Up
back
that.
after all these years, I'm like, oh, that is totally how we would have done that. Just our personalities. Like, of course, that's how we did
Isn't
that.
that funny? Yeah, one of those where you look back and you're like, oh, that's on brand. You
Yeah,
know, like that
exactly.
totally is aligned with who we are, you know, to our core.
Yeah.
I love that because I think one of the most special things about whether it's a marriage or a business or, you know, any relationship or whatever, but like there's so much value in going through the process together.
Oh,
like
yeah.
actually building something together. It's why I have such a good marriage with my wife. Is it, you know, we're actively participating in building a dream, and you know we're
Right.
aligned with where we're headed, and we contribute and all that stuff. And it's so. Whenever I get to talk to some of the most high performing people in the world, there's usually a very high performing spouse next to them, you know, kind of pushing everybody along and keeping the momentum going.
Yeah.
So that being said, though, business ownership is brutally difficult, as I've learned over the last 3 years. And marriage is brutally difficult, you know, as I've learned over the last 10 or so.
Yeah.
Ish. I think it's 10. But so I'm curious then, walk me through so Steve, you'd already started Robbins then at this point, or you were about to. The idea was at least there.
The idea was there.
Yeah. And then you guys decided to take the leap and you quit your job?
Correct. Yeah. So in New Mexico, you have to be in the trades for 4 years before you can go take your contractor's
Oh,
license.
okay, interesting.
Right? And so obviously there was that period I had to be in the field in the trade for 4 years before I could go take a contractor's license. So at 4 years,
Which happened to be June of the next summer after we got married.
Yeah,
It was
so-
like, oh, you hit 4 years. Okay, let's
at
go.
that point, it was like, all right, we can start the paperwork process, move through it, go take the tests, and become licensed, right? So that was really the key point.
The
of
catalyst,
it
yeah.
Just burnt the time to be able to do it.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, it was a great company to work for at the time. I learned a ton, right? I mean, you learn some in trade school, but then you get out of that and you're like, they
real
didn't
world.
teach me anything.
Right, right.
But hindsight, trade school was a great thing as well. But so yeah, it was just an idea, and then after getting married and hitting that time frame where I could go do it, once we could, then it was just full throttle ahead.
Talk to me about the risk there. I mean, and I know back to my, early newlywed days, we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together.
Yep.
We had just bought this little house that was in such bad shape we were afraid to show my in-laws it. Like it was, So So talk to me about where you guys are at life-wise at this moment. I mean, are we at a situation where we're comfortable and we can take some risk, or what's life looking like?
So yeah, it was kind of a perfect scenario. My sister had a detached garage out behind her house, but well before we got married or even met, I had converted that into like a one-room apartment. And so I didn't live with my parents. That was one of the rules, so that was kind of handy, you know.
Part of the list.
Yeah, I lived in
Too
the
bad you don't
back
have
of my
that
sister's
list.
place, but other than that, right? So, no kids, no mortgage, no real debt to speak of, and so the risk for us was like, well, if we fail, I guess
We
Get a
live
job.
with our
I got a
parents.
trade, and I know
Yeah.
I know I can use it and go anywhere and get a job.
Right.
So, I mean, at that point, it was like now or never. So
Right.
if we throw 2-3 kids in the mix, it's going to get
Whole nother story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Gosh, I can just envision Steve and Michelle in the detached garage. Like, you talk about a grassroots, kind of story.
Where it started.
Now the warehouse is, probably 10 times as
Oh,
big
yeah.
as the
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
as
very
the
different
garage.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me about that first truck. I remember a while back I
Oh,
was
Michelle loves the story.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting starting our marriage and our relationship with that heading of a business. As soon as we got married, it was like, okay, well, 4 years will come this summer, and so let's start saving money for a work truck. And when you have a heading, things just kind of fall into place, And so his family worked in the oil field business, so they were like, hey, this company's having an oil field auction where you can get a decent truck at a good price. So we're like, perfect. So we had saved up $3,000, which was a ton of money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were able to buy our first work truck for $3,000 at an oil field auction. And we went and got some like little vinyl stickers and stuck on it ourselves, like, we did it. We're, this is it. And so with his tools, and that truck, that was was it.
The know-how, obviously. The literally tools in the back of the truck.
Yep.
A magnet on the door that says, what does it say at the time? Robbins?
Yeah, Robbins
Yeah.
Heating and Air.
Robbins Heating
and
and
a
Air.
cell phone number.
And we're rolling.
And we're in.
It's so funny though. I remember, because I've always been meant to be an entrepreneur. I've realized in hindsight, like when I was a kid, I rented my parents' VHS tapes out of their garage.
Oh, hilarious.
I started a garbage can cleaning company.
Yeah, dude, yeah.
Now that I look back, it's like,
Yeah.
I was meant to, be an entrepreneur. But I remember when I started Ascent Digital, my first real business, and I had the business cards, and I got this little from the bank, like a book of checks and the whatever, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm starting something from nothing, and it's such a exhilarating feeling of like
Yes.
something's coming to fruition and kind of coming to life. I can't imagine though doing it at that stage. Probably some pros and cons to the stories. I had a lot more. I had 2 kids and a pregnant wife, and a mortgage,
risk,
and
yeah.
a lot more like walking away from that. But I also had a foundation and connections, and I had built a network and stuff like that. Where on the flip side of it, maybe not as much to risk, but also not
to go-
nearly
yeah, nothing to go with,
And
like-
you had to. I didn't have to spend a ton of money to start my company. A digital agency is fairly low barriers to entry in terms of starting. So I just love envisioning that story of you guys as the newlyweds and the truck and the magnet and all of that stuff.
Yep.
So what was the plan there? Was there an official? I mean, did you guys have a business plan? What was your capacity at the time? And I'm assuming you weren't nearly as dialed as you are now. Is what I'm trying to learn.
No. Well, and then we realized pretty quickly that I do the books, he did all the work. I know how to use a computer and balance a checkbook. Those were my skill sets to
Right.
start. But using the internet, just Googled, how do you start a business in New Mexico? So I would go find him on job sites, here, I need you to sign this. They need your signature on this, da-da-da. I had no credit because I was a child.
Right. Literally.
So it was like, hey, you have to do this and this. So I was the kind of fact finder, finding things and doing all the paperwork side. And then we just kind of started telling a few neighbors and friends, we're going to start our own business. So when we finally, I don't know that there was a real intentional date. It was just if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen. So we had one neighbor who needed a furnace. So we were like, okay, well, we have our first job. So we'll put our 2 weeks notice in. Most likely they're going to let you go because you're starting your own business.
Right.
And on Monday we have one job. And then after that, I Googled, to have a successful business, you're supposed to have a business plan. So I was like, let me write one of those. So I would just start. Anyways, he didn't know this at the time, but in our little 1-room apartment, I was starting to write this business plan and had a goal in 10 years that we would have a shop in town with 10 employees. So that's where I was headed. And then he didn't know that until 10 years later.
Where were you headed? What was your vision? Were you guys aligned in growth goals, or were you working?
No, I don't know that we're still aligned in growth goals.
We'll get there.
I go to work. That's what I do. I mean, it's interesting though. There's a lot of very skilled tradesmen out there, right, that have the ability to go do it on their own, right? And I had the ability to go do the work on my own. I didn't have the business mindset. It was here, right? And the nice thing about that is we're complete opposites.
Oh, yeah. I do not have the mechanical mindset or capability at all.
It was like the perfect scenario. I could go do the work, and I never really questioned on how the paperwork and any of that really stuff worked. Just we'd sit down at midnight at night. Hey, okay, we need to bill out some stuff. We're running out of money. Oh, well,
okay.
I got 3 weeks worth of stuff that I haven't filled out, right? So anyway.
Give me your receipts.
Where have you been? What are we doing? Can we bill somebody?
Right.
Yeah.
I learned how to not take dictation. That's like an old school word. But I learned how to type extremely fast. Like just start talking, and I will start billing so that we can pay our bills.
Take notes. And, yeah. At that stage, walk me through what it feels like. Like, is it fun? Is it exciting? Is it stressful? Is it scary? What do those midnight nights feel like at the, in the garage apartment, in the first year of marriage, all that stuff?
First year of marriage, first year of business. I mean, we kind of got the double effect, right? People are like, just be careful. Your first years of marriage is the toughest, right? You're trying to figure out who each other are.
Right. Let's throw in a business on that,
right? So I was petrified. Michelle's always had like just pure faith. All right, we're going to go ahead and make this happen and do whatever it is. And she's always kind of been like that. And I'm like, all right, I'll just keep and work harder, I guess. Whatever, we'll just work. We'll just go to work.
Right.
Right. And so I think that was the biggest deal is just the two different mindsets of she's going to make her goals happen. And I'm just like, all right, maybe I can just hold on to your coattails and go fast enough to make some of this happen. So like today we've got 28 employees. And I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I would have 28 employees.
Yeah.
Ever, right? And so.
Do you think without Michelle that the business would have grown? I mean, obviously not to the extent that it did, but do you think without Michelle that it would have turned into even like a business, or do you think you would have sort of been a solopreneur?
I'd have probably been a solo guy.
We even joke now. I'm like, if it was up to you, you'd still be a one guy in a truck.
Working, yeah. Hey, some of it might be easier, no. Yeah. But
well, and I think that's the benefit of starting with that, like, and that young too. It's like you don't know any different. So it's like you, as an older adult, you're like, oh, there's risks. Let me take all that into calculation. But at that age, you're like, who cares? Let's go. We can always live with our parents. So
I love that.
Some of that was a benefit, of like, we don't know how hard this is going to be, so let's test it.
Is that where your confidence came from? Because, Steve had mentioned that you sort of had this, they use the word faith, but kind of this like confidence, faith, whatever you want to call it, for moving forward and I'm going to call it dreaming big and doing all of those things. Any idea, did that come from not having a lot to lose, or when you kind of look back, where did that confidence or faith come from?
Probably part of it was not having a lot to lose. It was like, really, what's the worst that could happen, right? But the other part, I think some of that is just how I'm wired, that once I have that gut feeling of this is going to happen, there is no other way. And I've only done that on a few things where I'll come to Steve like, hey, this is going to happen. Sorry, you're just going to come with me now because we're doing it. But it's not on everything. Like, I mean, it's only been really like 4 or 5 things over the course of our whole marriage and business that one of them is the business. One of them is we're growing it.
You're right. Whether you like it or not.
Some of it, buying our first house. So Steve, we had discussions like, I'm like, we need a house. We need to kind of move out from, and his sister and her husband, oh my gosh, they're still our favorite. And God bless them for letting us live there. But it's like, we need to go and get on our own.
It's time, yeah.
And I'm thinking that. He's like, we don't have any bills. Like, no, we can't afford this.
This is great.
And I'm like, no, we're doing it. So I called a realtor and was looking at houses. Again, I have no credit. I can't even buy this house.
Right.
But I had a house picked out. I'm like, you need to come look at our house. We're buying this house. He's like, well, okay.
So funny.
So it was back in the days of signature only loans. Again, I have no credit. I'm like, hey, they need they need you to sign here. You're buying a house. And then after about 6 months, he was like, "Okay, we can't afford this." I'm like, "I told you."
I'll make this happen. Yeah, it's so funny. I relate to you so much in those ways, because when we were buying our first house, I remember vividly telling my wife, like, you got to just trust me.
Yeah,
I
promise this
know
will
this
work.
isn't, but you got to trust me. You know, like, we're buying this house. Now's the time. We'll make it nice. Trust me. You know, whatever. And I've always kind of had that, like, just trust me. And she's gotten to the point now. In fact, I probably should have her on the podcast, but she's gotten to the point now where the trust is truly there. Like, you know, she knows I've got a vision, I'm headed somewhere, and she's contributing in all these amazing ways. But early on, it was a lot of that. Like,
Yeah,
no,
come
this,
on.
this is happening. Trust
Well,
me.
and
that.
on the flip side, he would be doing a job, and I'm just fascinated, and I'm asking him all these questions, and it's driving him totally bonkers.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure.
just watch and learn. I'm like, but what are you doing that for? Da-da. You know, and
Why do
now
you do
I'm
it like that?
And now I really don't have any idea where it's headed, but I'm like, I know the end will be awesome. I'll just clean up and do what I can
Right.
to assist the process.
Just trust, yeah. So you never had, quote unquote, a real job?
No. I
Wow.
worked at Office Max for a summer when I was 16, and then my parents did own. They were my dad was a partner in a business, and that's where I kind of got the idea
You
of
got
like
some-
one day I'd want to own my own business. So I worked for them in high school, and then of course we got married my senior year. So I've never actually had a real job.
Wow. What's the learning curve been? Walk me through that learning curve then, because I appreciate my tenure in corporate America. Like, I learned a ton. I learned how to, you know, I went to school, studied marketing, got a minor in economics. So I learned, you know, that side of it, and then spent 11 years at a real job where I got to learn how to read a balance sheet and, like, learn how to run meetings, you know, just the stuff of doing a business. I've had a very steep learning curve ever since, just to be clear. But I at least had, you know, so walk me through that learning curve of, you know, because did you go to college?
Oh no.
Straight out of high
I
school?
took a few classes at the San Juan College, our community college there in Farmington, but other than that, that was it.
Wow. Walk me through that. How have you, because I've been able to observe how you guys run your company, and I've been so impressed with it for years. Does that come naturally? Have you been?
Oh no.
How have you been approaching that?
I would not personally recommend the learning curve at all to anyone that I personally have gone
took.
through. I guess I can't speak for Steve, but
No, we took that right
but just
together.
especially being married that young and not having lived out and done adult things, the learning curve between that. I mean, I became an adult plus an entrepreneur, which is like a double adult, really quickly.
Yeah.
There has definitely been some rough consequences from that. Nothing that we haven't, figured out and maneuvered through, but man, I probably don't recommend that.
Right. But you did it.
Yeah, and I think some of it is just the determination and stick-to-itiveness. Possibly not knowing anything has also been a benefit because then I've sought out, and it was kind of my idea of like, Steve, we need a business coach. You know how to do the work. I mean, we kind of have a great customer service mindset already, just naturally, like a very helping heart mindset. But it was like, we need a business coach. And he's like, no, we can't afford a business coach. I'm like, no, we need a business coach. So I guess
to this day, like
Yeah.
every time Rich or somebody else comes to me like, hey, boss, we got to do this. We can't afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah. To this day, that's the
a
answer.
great answer. Yeah.
But that actually kind of benefited. You can use your weaknesses in a good way, I guess, because then not only were we had enough smarts brought to the table, but now we're as smart as 10 other people. We had a business coach. We ended up getting a financial coach, all these other people to help teach us
Right.
what to do. So all of our processes, everything that we've gained, some maybe has been our idea, but 99% of it has just been other people's ideas. I
Yeah.
think the only key thing is the implementation. You can go to a lot of conferences and classes and come home and not do it. So it's the implementation part of those good ideas that I think has been a big key difference.
Yeah, I think that's what really set us apart as far as excelling where other people didn't.
Right.
Is all the information is there. Everybody's got the same information. When we go to these classes, it's just who's going to go home and do it.
Right.
And really, at the end of the day, that was it, right? So I always thought about it like there's two ways to get an education. You go to college and learn business or do whatever it is, and you can kind of get your feet wet in that area, or you can school of hard knocks it.
Right.
I think we paid well more than what a college would cost us. But, right, I mean, it's some of that stuff that we had to go through that process, I think, to make us who we are.
No doubt.
So.
And there's so much value in that process. I was just talking today to Brittany, my business owner, and we've had, as you guys well know, every entrepreneur I talk to, the highs are high, the lows are low, and we've had these wild swings. And finally today, I'm like, you know what? It's okay, because it's been part of the process.
Yep.
And we wouldn't know what we know today if we hadn't have. And there isn't a shortcut. Anything that's meaningful is difficult. You know what I mean? There's no wave the magic wand.
Yep.
If a path to a sustainable growing business were easy, it wouldn't. Well, first of all, it would never exist. But it wouldn't be worth it. We wouldn't want it. It's like that is the way.
Yep.
We have to. So when we were commiserating today, I was like, well, but you know what? How great that we learned all this stuff and things are better. It's feeling more stable, and it's just and then I'm sure we're right at the beginning of the next round, and the next round, and the next round, and all that.
Yeah, that's one thing we learned too. It's you go over these walls. I mean, you start and you kind of hit this wall and you make it over it, and you're like, yeah, and then all of a sudden you're at the next wall. You're like, dang it.
Right.
So it's just a constant growth over every wall that you face. But you're right. It's hard. I think one of the blessings of staying in business as long as we have is you realize it's not the lows and the highs stop being so high and low. You kind of
can't wait for that day.
You kind of get leveled out. Or even, like COVID,
I'm losing my hair over it.
I mean, COVID was huge for every person, right, in the whole globe. But when you're a business owner, that adds a whole nother level. And so you kind of, gratefully we were able to approach it with a little bit of confidence on, you know what, we'll figure it out. We figured everything else out. And I think that's kind of the battle cry of entrepreneurship and business ownership is we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the most common things with every business owner and entrepreneur I talk to is they've got this attitude of I can handle it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've got this. I don't know. It's just kind of this confident, and it's not cocky or arrogant. It's just I've been through hard times before. Yeah,
I want to find the challenge in it. It's loving that challenge.
Right. Do you think from your perspective, Michelle, that the challenges would be as extreme or as difficult as they were if you weren't trying to grow? Was there ever a moment where it's okay, I don't know, we've got our 6 employees and we're making an income now that life could have been easier, or that those challenges maybe could have been avoided had you taken the foot off the gas and said, let's ride this out forever? Or do you think that problems with business were going to come whether you're growing or not?
I've heard the phrase before that if you're not growing, you're dying in business. So some of it, but at some point you need to level out and operate. I don't know that we've ever had that option in our industry because the need has been so great.
Yeah.
So we never once have had a month where it's we don't have any work to do. There was always so much work, such a need in the community that I think our mindset and the way we're wired just couldn't turn away from that.
Right.
Because that's what the other consequence would be is maybe we could, take a little break and not work so hard and be a little more sane mentally. But how can I justify that and leave all these people hanging that actually need services that we provide?
Right.
So some of it, we didn't really ever have a choice.
Yeah.
So it was well, if we don't have a choice, we're growing this baby.
Right. Here we go. Yeah. What's been the most challenging times? You had mentioned COVID a little bit, but I know that how many years in business are we now?
22.
22. Yeah. Over the last 22 years, I'm sure, like you had mentioned, the highs being high and the lows being low and that sort of stabilizing. But I have to imagine there's been some trying times and some of those real challenging seasons. Walk me through what those were like.
So the first major one we hit was the crash of 2008, right? Because we're in the construction world.
Right.
Right. And so when the housing market took a crash, obviously they slowed way down on building houses. There was just me and 1 or 2 other guys back then. We were probably doing 50 plus new construction houses a year. And so that was a major source of our income. We did some change outs, some service work, but
most of it was coming from new construction.
Most of it's coming from new construction. So that was the first one. And then I think that's when we realized that, hey, we need this coach. We need somebody else to help us figure out and build the foundation on it to understand how the business works, how to make sure that we can weather some of these storms. And I think mentioning it going back to COVID on that is I think that's kind of what helped us sail through COVID. nobody made it through it without any bumps and bruises.
Of course.
But it made it much easier for us because we knew we had a solid foundation. We knew exactly what we were going to do. All the mandates and stuff that came at us from every different direction, right? You don't know which one's right, which one's wrong. And just being able to make sure that our guys knew what they needed to do, how we had to enter into somebody's home, right? Because we got to go into their homes. Their stuff is broken. They need it fixed, whatever. And so getting through that. I think those are really the two biggest, other than growing, obviously.
Right, the normal.
When we bought our first building and decided, okay, we're going to be a business now, right? Instead of just working from our home with a handful of other guys and stuff like that. But I think probably those three have been the biggest.
I think we've had a lot of challenges to transitioning into being managers. I mean, right, being a business owner and kind of being the tradesman and the bookkeeper is one thing, but then realizing that you play a big role in people's lives. Even to the point of, like, I don't want to have to fire this person because I feel really bad and I don't want to affect their life negatively. And that for me was really difficult.
Yeah.
And you learn that, sometimes you have to make decisions, and we try to make the best decisions we can that are fair all across the board. But sometimes people come into the company and sometimes they leave the company. And that for me was a really tough transition to figure out how to be a manager, how to be a manager of a manager, how to make these decisions. and a lot of it helped just with the processes and procedures that we had, that if you have data and you can show things, it's much better than just to be like, oh, I feel this is working, I feel this is not working.
Right.
So having those processes and procedures helped curb a lot of that. But that was tough. You have a Christmas party and 50 people show up and all these little kids are there. You're like, oh no, we're responsible for a lot.
Isn't that crazy? That's been, and I've got to follow up to that, but that's been the wildest thing for me is like, not only am I, do I need to feed my family now, I've got 10 families I've got to feed. Mm-hmm. And the pressure of that is...
It's immense.
Indescribable.
Yeah.
And then you've got to kind of like protect them from the highs and the lows, like they don't need to know how stressful things are or, whatever, when revenues are changing, whatever, all that stuff. And then you also have to kind of like pivot with the good stuff too, and it's just a wild thing. I was going to ask though, you had mentioned kind of, I'm going to call it hiring and firing, but your approach to that. I've been in business 3 years now. In fact, it's 3 years this month. And I have let more people go in the last 3 years than I did in the 11 years at my corporate job. And I was in leadership, there. It's been an interesting thing for me to like reflect back on because I, though, also care way more than I ever did. Mm-hmm. Like, I have yet to this day let someone go where I'm not just crying my eyes out.
You lose sleep over it.
Yeah,
yes,
like a
100%.
wreck and a mess. Mm-hmm. But it's also, it's more emergent now. And now it's like, I have to do these things, and I have to do them quickly. Mm-hmm. I have to do, whatever. So I'm just kind of curious, now that there's 21, 22 years of experience under your belt, and for both of you guys, has your approach to hiring and firing changed and evolved? And if so, how?
It has. You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have more work than what we can do. We're always looking for people.
What a great problem.
Right?
Exactly.
And so we're always short on people. And we had kind of done the same thing. Hey, this guy came in. He's been in the trade before. Let's hire him. And we found out real quick that was not the best way to do it.
Because you were hiring on a skill set?
Yeah,
or
to
on
some
if
degree.
they could breathe. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you're alive.
Right. We need somebody in a truck, right? And so we've completely changed on how we hire people. We hire very slowly, right? Hire slow, fire fast, right? So we've got a 3-step interview process. There's 5 of us on the leadership team, and in all 3 of those interviews, everybody on the leadership team has to sit in on at least one of those interviews. It's hard to get in our door now because we're looking for the right people, the right culture, the right fit, the right personality. We can teach the trade. And that's what we've started to do is we just bring the right individuals in that fit our core values. And we think they do, right? With the interviews that we're trying to pound out that information and see where they sit on it. But that has really kind of changed the game as far as, don't get me wrong, we still get people in that just either they're not a fit in the trade or whatever it is, right? And so great people. Just the trades may not be the position, or
Right.
the industry for them.
So is it a safe assumption to say that you would not, even though the need is there and there's more work than you guys can handle, you would not hire before you would hire the wrong person?
100%. It's so counterintuitive, especially because of how busy we are. I mean, we've had social media blasts on, I would use Robbins, but they're too expensive and all this stuff. We're like, not good. But 100%. I think I don't want that pain anymore of having that revolving door or letting those people go. Like, I'm like, no way. And you can't do everything perfectly.
Of course.
But that is, even if we're desperate for people, we are not going to hire unless they fit really the mission of our mission statement, where we're trying to go, where we're trying to head. Because we just realize, now I have to let you go to protect all these other people whose lives are now affected. It's just not worth it.
Right.
Well, and we try to set a standard in our industry and in our town. And so the customers know what kind of experience they're going to get when we come to the door. And so a lot of times we won't hire if they're already in the trades. Because
Interesting.
Bad
I
habits.
don't want to have to spend all that time and energy trying to break habits.
Yeah.
And so we build it to what we want, and the guys understand the expectation of when they walk into somebody's home or whatever, and the customer knows it too, right? And so if we bring the wrong guy in because we have more work, let's just throw this guy in the truck, and they don't get that experience, then we're more worried about that than we are of, hey, we can't get to you till Tuesday, but we're going to be there on Tuesday.
Right.
With a nice guy who's not creepy. We've
Right.
been told we don't hire creepy guys.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
that's a
Which is
quality
very a good
standard
thing,
now.
yes.
But I think some of that comes down, and with our business coaching and stuff, that they've helped us drill into this. But it's like the whole point of why we started our business was for quality. Steve, working in the trades already for 4 years, learned a lot, but also saw a lot that didn't need to happen, right, that could have been done better. And so that has been a driving factor of our mission. And I think that's maybe why we've been able to retain the quality even growing, because you have that standard of, we're not varying from this standard.
Right.
If we lose business, if we lose employees, no matter what happens, and I think it's allowed us to remain authentic, because that's really the true reason why we went in. People should be treated better than they were. Quality work should be done better than it is. Employees should be treated better than they were. So those 3 things have been kind of our legs of our stool that we've sat on for all these years.
Yeah. No, I love it. It seems like there's a theme, though, too, that you guys have continually invested in. I'll call it yourselves, but in outside help, whether it's been the coaches or the classes or the conferences or whatever. When did that become a priority? And well, first of all, is that a safe assumption? And when did that become a priority? And if a new entrepreneur was listening, what would you say, in terms of the priorities of that investment into those things? Where would they fall on the list?
I'll answer, or I'll start.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that is something that you have to have in business. You have to have that person, and it can be the one person, right? A business owner can do both things. Be a visionary and be able to see and also be hands-on and do the work. We aren't able to do that, so we each take those separate roles. But having that vision of where you're headed, but you also, in whatever industry you're in, where's the industry heading? So you got to be able to pivot, because things do change. Change is essential, right? That is part of our culture, our values.
Welcome
of
to
what
it.
We, yeah. And so if you don't change and adapt, there's a story actually told between Harley Davidson and Callaway Golf. So Harley Davidson hasn't pivoted yet to the younger generation. A lot of kids don't want a $50,000, $60,000 motorcycle. Callaway Golf now has Topgolf. Right? So golf is an expensive sport. How do you get into it? Well, they pivoted and now have a whole new generation of kids. So it's more of a long-term strategy, I would suggest, is pretty important in business, so that you can stay relevant for the market and what the people you serve want and need.
Right.
But I'm more of the visionary, I'm looking where we're heading, and Steve is the implementer,
The operator,
we call him.
yeah.
The operator. He's the one putting all the cogs in place.
Do you guys work off of traction?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that was interesting is in the trades, when I first got into it, the old timers were very reluctant to share their knowledge. And so it was kind of tough to break into it, if you will. And, you know, as we started our own company and started doing it, and I knew my way of doing some stuff. And as far as the business goes, when we were working with one of our suppliers, and they would have these conferences, and that's kind of where we met our business coaching firm, right? It was through one of those conferences. But once we finally broke through that wall, it was very interesting to see how giving the industry is with all the knowledge, mainly because they know 90% of the people aren't going to go implement it.
Right.
But the knowledge is there.
Give
and
it
if you're
away.
willing to, here it is. And they were so free at giving us information and their knowledge as far as growing the business and stuff like that. So we've tried to take that as far as why would we hold any of that information back from our guys? Our guys probably know more about business than they really think they know about business.
Right.
But it's one of those deals where, look, man, I need you to know this because it's going to help us. It's going to help our customers. It's going to help you as an individual provide for your family. You need to know this. And so I think it's one of the most important things we do is trying to stay relevant with the industry and do that.
It's so funny. The other day we were doing like a little internal review at the conference table, you know, going over some videos and whatever. And I was like, okay, our standard now baseline is constant evolution. Like the only thing we can expect now is that it's going to change. So buckle up for it, be ready, you know, get ready. But I also, you reminded me too of, I say often that, you know, feel free to share the recipe because the cake still won't taste the same. But it's like, give value, add value, you know, share that information. And what an interesting shift in, maybe that's a cultural shift, or maybe social media probably has a lot to do with that, of like the old timers not being as willing to, you know, share information, where now there's like, you know, business owners are growing and evolving and they've done it and now they sell the course on how you can, and
you can get a master class for anything.
Right. And but to your point, implementation is key. Because so many times people will go to that stuff and then not implement it. How have you been able to have the I'll call it discipline to continue to, because it's obvious that there's a priority to, you know, that you guys are investing in yourselves, and whether it's the coaches or the conferences or whatever. And then and that's something I've observed from you from the first time I met you, is that you implement these things. There was one, I'm trying to remember when, you guys went to the that Jocko Willink.
Oh my gosh!
What was that
so
one called?
Awesome.
That was a blast.
Echelon Front is the company, but
So,
what is
field
it
training.
called? Field training exercise. FTX.
I messaged him to be on my podcast. He didn't reply. So if you
on,
get
Jocko,
a word,
If we got it in on
you
it.
know, nudge it for me. But I watched that happen, and then I watched implementation sort of take place and these things like that. Where has that come from, or did you just not? Because I loved what you had said earlier about there's almost a benefit in not knowing. You know, that most dangerous statement is that we've always done it this way, where you're like, I don't know, it's almost like because you hadn't had a job or formal education that you're like the perfect case study for this because you learn and do it. It's so, you know, it's so so simple, but so powerful. Do you think that that's where that has come from, or do you think you've been like, no, I'm here intentionally to learn this stuff and then implement it into my business? I mean, what level of that has come from Michelle as who you are as a person versus just that you didn't know any better? And
I don't know. It's hard to separate the two because I don't know anything. I'm like, I just show up and do it. I hope it's right. Some of it may be, you know, when you come from a place where you don't know what's happening and someone helps you, you're like, that feeling is so awesome, where you're like, thank you so much. Like, I just want to give that to other people. So even if it's in business, like I love doing this thing. Like I loved being able to work at my parents' business and they had a refrigerator full of drinks that you could just go get a drink. I'm like, that was so cool. We should totally do that. Do we do that? Yes, we do. And we have snacks and all the stuff.
We have ice cream in our freezer. It's my top priority. We will always have ice cream in the freezer.
You know, so you just have those ideas growing up like, well, I want other people to experience that too because I loved it. And so, you know, and going to the training, you know, like Jocko was incredible. And so it was just like, I want our whole team to experience how cool this was. So I think that's the more of the driving factor of, I just want people to experience that feeling of, well, that was awesome. Like, hey, I used to work at Robbins and they taught me this and this. And like when it's all said and done, that people can look back and feel benefited by something that we could have done. So it may be just that, like, I think it's the right thing to do. Even like the knowledge we've been speaking about, like it's the right thing to do to share it.
Right.
It's the right thing to do to be generous and And you can do that in more ways than just, giving a gift. I mean, you can do that with your knowledge, with your business, with how everything's operates.
Right.
So I just want people to love it. My brother actually works for Google, and I got to go visit Google and tour the facility. I'm like, this is so cool. I want people to feel cool at Robbins Heating and Air,
Yeah.
So you just kind of copy, like, can we put a slide in
We
here?
don't have the
Okay.
beanbag room. We're just
You
gonna
guys
take
don't have a
nap
campus
midday,
yet?
We don't have
you know?
the massage room and all the cool
Right.
stuff, but maybe one day.
Yeah. Someday.
Climbing wall. We
Right.
just don't have it.
Obviously, it's easier to invest in those types of things at your guys' stage, right? 22 years
Right.
in, you're established. I mean, there's at the very least, there's less financial barriers to
Right.
that. It seems though like you did it even early on when there were. I'm assuming that year one you weren't just printing money and
No.
I could be wrong.
No,
but,
yeah.
But still, then, because like a lot of small businesses are at that stage where it's like, gosh, do I pay myself or do I go to the conference, or do I get walls in the office, or do I
Right.
go to the course, or whatever it might be. I'm just kind of curious what your guys' mindset was on that, or now that you have the benefit of hindsight, where the wisdom came from to invest in this continual education and these outside help at such an early stage. Because I'd imagine it came with sacrifice, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting you said that. Do I pay myself or do I go to this conference? And if you're going to go to that conference, you better do something from that conference, right? Or you should have just paid yourself, at least paid your mortgage.
Got to implement. Yeah.
Right? If you don't implement it, don't go. But that's the whole reason to go on those conferences. From what we found out,
Right.
is yes, they're expensive. I mean, they're expensive. Jocko's not cheap.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? But, we learned a lot of good information. We brought it back. We shared it with the whole team, just all of it, and learning how to, pass down that leadership and do all that stuff. So obviously, if you're going to invest in something, you might as well use it.
Right.
And that's kind of been our theory, even with all of the implementation side, is it wasn't cheap.
Right.
So
Well, I think that wording is so critical to making that decision. Is it an investment? Do I pay myself or do I invest in this thing? What's going to come out of it? And so, making those decisions on, I think we really need to invest in this. I think it'll help us in the long run. I think when it comes to employees, and if you decide, well, do I give them everything out of my pocketbook? Do I keep all of it for myself? What's the balance there? I learned early on from a business coach that if our employees are getting paid well, that means we're doing well. So when our salesmen started getting a higher paycheck than me that week, it was like, whoa, you can feel, sometimes as a business owner, you can be like, oh, I'm putting all this risk, all this work, I lose sleep, like he shouldn't be getting paid more than me. But then you realize, yes, he should, because that means you're doing good.
Right.
So having, approaching it with that mindset over the years has made it really easy to benefit the employees and perks and spiffs and all the things, because if they're happy, we're happy.
Right. Yeah.
So starting with that mindset's probably pretty important to having a good culture.
Right. Yeah. Well, gosh, and I can see how that would obviously impact, to your point, culture.
Right.
In such a big way. Isn't that an interesting thing to think about? That it's like your dreams are big enough that other people's dreams can fit within them.
That's cool.
Like that you've dreamed so big that a salesman can sometimes make more than you, but he can chase his dreams there and build the life that they want and support their family and all that stuff. It's just so cool to think about that, of like, because there's all that risk and that stress that's there. But at least for me, it helps me be like, other people are chasing their dreams too.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
figuring out this situation. I've got another layer of it in my business, at least. We talked about the pressure side of it. My clients' livelihoods are on the line too.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So it's like all these layers of this has to work.
Yes.
Or I'm in trouble. Because we care so much. You want. I mean, it's a lot like your guys' approach to the people that you work with. You genuinely take care of it, and I can sense that when you're talking about trying to grow and continue to meet the demand that exceeds the supply currently. What is that like when you talked about the for example, online social media or negative reviews or whatever? How do you balance celebrating the wins of the business but protecting yourself from the losses, the emotionally?
That's hard. I don't know that there's a great easy answer to that. trying to have perspective helps, realizing that like one day I'll come back and I'll have taken care of these clients, even though I see none of that right now at the moment. That's tough. I don't know that I have a great solution or recipe for that yet. I think it's a daily battle for me to keep focusing on that.
I take it all so personal.
I do too.
Yeah. And it's something I got to practice at, because like the
counseling helps.
Therapy. I run.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways, you
can gauge my stress level by my weekly mileage. The higher the mileage, the higher the stress. Yeah. But because I'm like, I just feel it all so, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. Part of me loves that. Like, I hurt hard, but I love hard. I celebrate big. I like just am down in the dumps when something bad. I'm like my wife jokes all the time that most people are a dial. They've got 0 through 10. I'm a switch. Like I just go on and off, like good, bad, and anything in between. But I do think for longevity of business ownership, somehow trying to like balance at least the lows, would be of value.
Yeah, I think if you can't, right, you're going to just get burnout.
Right.
Right. There's got to be some way.
Too much emotion involved. Yeah.
There's got to be some way, running, whatever it is. Mine is hunting.
Right.
So, I get out and I just go, right? And so I can just at some point just place it all back, and it's going to be there when I get back.
Yeah.
But even with like the 1-star review, right? We don't have very many of those. I mean, it's very, very. We got over 1,200 reviews, and there's only maybe a handful of ones, right? But we talked about it early on as we like to see the ones. Where are we falling short? What didn't we accomplish on our goals?
What a great perspective.
That didn't have that, right? And so I honestly I kind of like the negative feedback, right? Because I can't be with every guy in every truck.
But because it teaches you something.
And it lets me know, did I fail at explaining this situation or not train the individuals right, or we set them up to fail? This is a maintenance guy, and we put him inside of a service call. Accidentally didn't know that, right? And so maybe it's in the office. We got to communicate a little bit better on how that works. So those are more of like a training aspect of how do we make this better.
Right.
Thank you for your the feedback, because I think a lot of people are very willing to give 5 stars.
Right.
Right. You've got to really tick somebody off to get a 1.
Like, it's got to be bad.
But let me. Then you got your ones that just only get 1s. But anyway,
right.
I mean, those ones you just kind of let go. But if it's honest feedback,
don't go there.
Please, let's go with it. Right.
Right.
I mean, let's understand. What happened. How can we train and help all of our guys be better and not fall into that same hole.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
I think along with that mindset too of embracing the negative, right? Like what did go wrong. I think the second thing I would add is the best business advice I ever received. And we were at dinner. It was a heating and air conditioning type of thing. And we were at a table with a very, very large contractor from Albuquerque. I mean, he dwarfs our business by so much. And so when he said, let me share the best business advice I've ever gotten, I just keyed in like, please, I want to hear this. And his exact words were, when your face gets in the mud, you pick yourself up and you keep going. I'm like, that's it? Are you serious right now? But in all honesty, that's
Simply don't quit.
Simply don't quit.
Yep.
And just try to have perspective. Obviously, you got to sharpen the skills. You got to take care of yourself. You got to have the time where you just shut the phone off.
Right.
And realize the world is not going to fall apart. Your business is not going to fail. Just take some time and come back stronger. But literally, don't quit.
Yeah.
That's the success.
It's so funny. So there's a new saying that I've subscribed to. Well, it's new to me. It's fortitude invincimus, and it's Latin for through endurance we conquer.
Yeah.
And it's this. I've been geeking out lately. I am an endurance athlete. I love running long distances and stuff, and I've been loving the parallels behind endurance and success. Mm-hmm. And it's so simple, but so hard.
It's so hard.
If just not stopping.
Yep.
Get out of the mud.
Right.
And wash your face off, show up again.
I mean,
and
there's
then show
been
up
times
again,
like
and then show up again.
Yeah, I haven't cried a lot at work, actually, probably only twice. But there has been times that it's like I'm in tears in the middle of my whole team because it's just so much. I just break,
Yeah.
So it's not easy, but just having the courage to put the car in park in the morning, walk through that front door, have a smile on your face, and try again.
And do it again.
Yep.
Oh gosh,
try
I love
again.
that. It's so simple but so profound. Mm-hmm. Just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
I think another thing too, speaking to like being a married couple and business owners, I mean, I've had my sister tell me, like, I can never do it. I can never do what you do, you know. But it's just that we started our marriage with that mindset of, like, I tried my best not to have a wedding because I'm like, I don't need this wedding. I just need a husband. Like, I need a marriage. I don't need, and that was just my mindset. But I think going into the marriage, just realizing this is what we want. We want the marriage. We want, you know, the business is going to work. There was no other options.
And we're going to keep going until we get there.
Yep.
I love that. Yeah. Because I share that mindset with both my marriage and my business partner and, you know, all of these things that I'm doing. That being said, like I said, it's simple, but it's not easy,
Yep.
you know, to just keep going. There's so many dynamics at play. I oftentimes kind of jokingly, but sort of sincerely talk about my business partnership as, you know, in some cases it's harder than a marriage,
Yeah.
you know, and then there's the dynamics of a marriage and, you know, all of these things. I'm curious, and you don't have to give me any more info than, you know, is needed to preface this, but I would imagine some complexities there with a growing business. We've talked about the highs being high, the lows being low. When and if, you know, does that then trickle into real life and marriage? And, you know, you had just earlier mentioned like shutting it down and recognizing that the business isn't going to go away and stuff. That's got to be increasingly difficult when you're married to your business partner. And, you know, you literally are living and breathing it all of the time. And you're also trying to build a life outside of work and raise a family and build a marriage. Yeah, you know, create a marriage and stuff like that. Have there been times when the business partnership has put strain on the marriage partnership, and how have you guys navigated them?
Go ahead.
Well,
Honest answers only.
well, I would say, you know, before I answer your question, on the flip side, how has marriage put a strain on the business
Ooh, fair.
partnership?
Yeah.
Because there are times that I'm like annoyed with him before the meeting even
Oh
starts.
my gosh, I didn't even think of that one.
And then I take it out in front of the whole team.
Totally.
And they're
I
like,
can see that of like, you know, you're trying to get the kids out the door to school and they didn't grab the dang shoes and now you're late and like
Yep.
whatever and you're flustered over
and
that.
somehow it's his fault,
and
right?
now,
So,
yeah. And
so
now
then
we
I
got
come.
to show up to work and act like we like each other.
I'm like a regular guy. It happened, whatever it was, last night. I didn't even recognize it, and she's been brewing on it all night long,
Yeah,
right?
she's still
and then
mad.
tomorrow morning we go to the meeting, and she's like, "Oh, it's on."
No, that
Wait a
is so.
minute.
I'm so glad you brought up that reverse perspective because I think one of the requirements of a leader or an entrepreneur is compartmentalization, right? Of like, I've got to act like things are fine. I can be carrying all the stresses of the world or be in a fight with my wife or whatever, and I got to walk in the doors and
You're responsible. Yeah.
take care of business. You know, do what I got to do. Elaborate on that more for me because both sides of that. You know, in fact, probably that one is even more.
And I think our managers that are on our leadership team with us, those poor guys, they're saints. Because there's been times where they're just like, "Oh, sit back." And it's got to be awkward, you know? They're just like, "Oh,
we have
man."
an argument in front of the office door and they can't get out. They're like, "Oh, now I'm trapped." They're arguing in front of the door.
We bought all of our employees headphones.
Oh, there you
Just
go.
in case, yeah.
We don't have walls yet. Here's your headphones. No.
Yeah.
I think some of it too has, again, I'm going to refer back to that, but we knew each other for 59 days before we got married.
Right.
So it wasn't like a long time.
Yeah, but on that real quick, because I think our stories are similar in that sense too. True love, like you knew like.
Well, first date, I came home and told my
Moment.
oldest sister, "I'm going to marry her."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with my wife, date one, instant one, I knew this was going to be my wife, and she knew it too. And we actually even spoke about it.
Wow.
Like, you know, carefully, but on the first date of like, oh gosh, I just met my wife. Like, this is about to be wild. And, you know, she's been, well, we have similar dynamics, but actually on Thursday of this week, we will officially be business partners too. We're buying a Airbnb in
Awesome.
There you go.
and, you know, so I'm teeing myself up so maybe this is good timing, but you know, and there's strength in those relationships that can withstand. I mean, gosh, you want to talk about what a relationship's made out of? Go through some adversity together, and you know, all of that's there. So very sincerely, it's like such a great, what a blessing, you know, to have that too. But I've got to imagine that there's times when, to bring it back, but your point of like the home dynamic impacting business, I would imagine is more difficult than the business dynamic impacting home. Have you guys? formalized or like established rules or boundaries with that? I mean, how do you, because 22 years is a heck of a marriage and a heck of a business.
Well, I think that was one of the very first things that really sprung us to being successful. And it wasn't immediate. It probably took us 10 years of business and marriage to figure out, okay, this is not my job. This is my job. That is your job. So I'm going to let you do that. But realizing, we went to counseling. No, I highly recommend that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But our counselor kind of told us, and because we are so opposite, he described it to us like sitting facing each other in a chair. Like I can see everything Steve can't see behind him. Same as he with me. And so
which is why you're so good together,
right?
But also why it's so hard.
And realizing that like what he says, not to take it personal, not to feel attacked, like why don't you just listen to me, all those things, but realize he's seeing my blind spots. So to be a little more open-minded, and same with him too, the things that I'm saying aren't just because I'm trying to be annoying or whatever the words are, but just that I'm seeing a blind spot. So maybe I should listen to what they're saying. That I think was a huge benefit for us along the way. And then,
and working with employees too, for me, right? Just understanding that not everybody sees the world in the same direction that I do.
Right.
But
it's not just
it doesn't mean they're dumb. They've got their strengths because they can see in a different direction.
Right.
So for me, I thought everybody, why don't you get this? Right? Well, not everybody thinks like I do, right?
Yeah.
So that helped out.
In the early days, we're both like hands-on and doing stuff, and then really separating, this is my job, I need to let that go. And that also played into when we had employees and managers of really defining roles, right? Good fences make good neighbors, like kind of similar concept. But having those managers come in, now we're not trying to micromanage or do things over them. It's like, I need to trust that that's happening. We have checks and balances and things in place, but that applied to us early on. I think that was one of the things that helped the most, staying married and in business.
Right, yeah. Have there been big ones that you guys have been misaligned, that you haven't been aligned on in terms of direction or goals or decisions, things like that?
Growing the business has probably been the hardest.
Yeah.
Because Steve is a very mechanically minded individual, so things need to fit nicely. They need to work together. Where I'm more like, I don't know how it's going to work, but I just know we're going to do it.
Right.
And that almost probably caused him like physical and psychological pain.
Right.
For me to be like, no, we're just going to do it. So that probably was the thing that we have probably struggled with the most. Should we grow the business? Should we not? This is really hard. Should we step back? I mean, we've probably talked about it, prayed about it 55 times over the years that we just keep coming back to, no, this is the way we need to go. Let's just keep going this way. But that's probably been the biggest struggle. And maybe not a misalignment, but probably where we haven't seen eye to eye.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, on my end of it, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist on the work, right? And so when I go out there and it literally has our name.
Literally.
Yeah, right? And so that I'm just like, you know what I mean? Well, if it wasn't so big, then I can control it a little bit more.
Right.
Maybe I just need to get better at training and teaching.
What a great perspective. Yeah.
Maybe I just need
There's some outside coaching coming in. Yeah.
So.
Sometimes I think seeing the world differently, because I maybe I'm a perfectionist in different ways, but in things like that, I'm like, good enough is fine.
Right.
And so it would be kind of a habit for me to be like, stop telling him that. Like, it's fine. Like, right? But I have to realize, like, that's his skill set. That's what makes our business so successful.
And that's the point.
So that needs
that there's complementing skill sets.
Right.
And
as I'm spiffing the employees and doing all these things, and he's like, could you stop doing that?
Right.
No, that's my skill. That's why, these things work or whatever.
We're both here for a reason.
And realizing that instead of letting that be an abrasive, point to let it work together.
Yeah. No, I love that. So my business partner, Brittany, and I are polar opposites in terms of, personality traits and skill sets and strengths and all that stuff. I mean, polar opposites. Thank goodness. But it was a learning curve for me because early on, I was putting a lot of pressure on her. I wanted her to be me. Mm-hmm. I wanted this, the all these things about me I expected. And then a business coach taught us, that's the last thing you want. Do you even know what a disaster this place would be if we had two men?
Of you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We would have energy through the roof, ideas like crazy. We'd be selling all sorts of stuff and we wouldn't know how to fulfill on it. It would be a problem. Yeah. And it was a very valuable lesson for me though that's why we partnered. So let's lean into the differences and the strengths.
Right.
There's a reason for that. Just the other day, she was showing me an ad that she made. It was about halfway through it, and I was like, "This is great." And she goes, "Well, you haven't finished it." I was like, "Well, I see the direction you're headed." I'm like, so then today she showed me another one. I was like, "I'm gonna watch the whole."
I have to wait. Yeah.
Watch the whole 60 seconds and then be like, "I loved it. It was perfect." You know, whatever. But so how do you then transition? Because well, like a business, marriage requires work. How do you transition from business partners to husband and wife? And how have you guys found those balancing acts, and when it's like, okay, we're taking off the work hat today and we're going to be husband and wife. How have you navigated that side of it and being able to set the business aside and apart, or have you?
Well, we finally got to the point where Michelle says, "I'm about 2 weeks away from
quitting."
from having a big fight.
Right.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I've learned actually.
Learned how to
I
communicate.
need to give him some preparation.
That's a valid. Yeah.
Okay.
Because before
All right,
I
so
was
You can't
just-
read her mind?
No, still.
Right.
Before I would just hold it in and have something bothering me or whatever, and then all of a sudden it would just be like, "That's it. Now we're done." And so I've really learned, I've gotten even better where it was like, "Hey, we need to go on a date in 3 days." And now I'm like, "Hey, I'm a couple weeks away."
I'm
and
doing okay right now.
And he's just like, "Okay, I need to go. We need to go on a date. We need to, hang out, spend some time together." And so learning.
Gauging that and communicating
Yes.
it.
And for me personally, it's learning that it's easy, I think, and natural, probably for everybody, to kind of blame on your spouse what your problems are, but having the recognition to realize no, I own my problems, and so they're not his fault, they're not his anything, those are mine. And so I can be more respectful and just, "Hey, I'm struggling, this is what's happening, but sorry, here's where it's at." And then to have that love where he's like, "Okay, let me help you out,
Right.
you're mine, so I'll help you." But
Right.
recognizing that has been a key for me personally.
And I don't know that we actually planned it, but it seems like with our kids, Michelle was the nurturer their first 10 years, right? And then it was more like, all right, Dad's going to beat them up now.
Yeah.
And just teach them about life.
Right.
Right. And I don't know, I don't know that we planned that. It was something that just kind of happened.
Well, it's who you are.
Yeah.
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 And the world needs more of it, by the way.
Yeah. And so my kids they're going to enter the world knowing that it hurts.
Right. Yeah.
So, not physically beating them up, but just not sheltering.
Well,
right?
there's so much power. I mean, just like complementing strengths in a business, there's so much power in those complementing strengths in the house too. And the masculine role and the feminine role and those complementing the yings and yangs of the world. It's so necessary. I can see too, we're going down this business venture in Moab with my wife and I, and there's been all sorts of planning and running the numbers, and we're terrified. We're literally on Thursday I will have $0 in my account. I mean, literally it's taking every dollar I have. But it's already been a strengthening experience too, of even some of it's fun, some of it's just decorating and whatever, but some of it's planning and the shared challenge of tightening our purse strings, we can't spend another dollar. Right. Or the gas is, you can put $50 in the truck today, or whatever, but we're doing it together. And there's something about, it's like foxhole camaraderie, but it's those shared experiences that if managed properly, I think can forge a much stronger relationship.
Oh yeah.
But if you're not careful, it can also just rip you apart. And that's what I think is so fascinating, is that you guys have been able to navigate and manage all of those dynamics in a world that, and it seems like, and I know no house is perfect and no marriage is perfect, but it seems like you guys have been able to use the business journey and life journey to bring you closer, or to at least keep you close. Is that a safe assumption?
Oh, yeah. It was weird because a couple of weeks ago, for some random reason, I'm walking through the office and a couple of our managers were there, and the thought crossed my mind. I was like, man, it's unfortunate that they don't get to work with their wives.
No way. That thought crossed your mind?
And then, I don't know why, but I thought, we've done it that's all we know, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, what would that, they go home and they talk about what they did that day, and I just assume she knows what I did that day.
She better.
Right?
Which I do tell
There's
people,
a
I'm like,
GPS
pretend
on the
like I know
front.
nothing, because we
Yeah.
don't actually talk that much.
Right, yeah. Have to preface it.
So, right, but it's just like, man, I love it. And I know that there's people that tell me, man, I don't know how you do it. There's no way I could run a business with my spouse, right? I'm like, I couldn't run one without her. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a weird thought. I was just, you guys won't get that opportunity.
Well, and it's insightful though of how healthy it is.
Yeah.
You know, to have that thought. Is the family business gonna include kids at some point? Is that a hope of your guys? Does that seem like a?
They're in this weird phase of like, we have one that's graduated from high school, one that's about to, but not really sure what their lives entail yet.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I think we have this decision on our hiring practices are so robust, they're going to apply to our children. Yeah. I hope our children are okay with that, but they know that, right? Like, we have seen, and this may be going on a tangent, but we have seen that if our employees are in the wrong position or if they're in the wrong industry, it does nothing but hurt them and the team.
Everyone.
So it's really like, no, this is helping you to go through this process. We're going to do all the things. And if you don't fit, we're going to tell you that.
Yeah.
And we're going to help you find whatever it is that you're meant to do.
Yeah. In fact, it's almost valuable that those processes are in place.
Exactly.
Can help them know.
Right.
If it's a win for them.
Successful. And so they haven't quite decided what they're doing yet. So, I mean, of course,
is
if
it
they
a hope
fit,
of yours?
It would be.
Tell the truth.
Well, here's what I tell my children, right? I don't want them to feel pressured like they have to be in this business.
Sure, but do you want it?
I would almost prefer them go start their own. And whether it's HVAC or whatever it may be, right? If they have that skill and they want to do it, I want them to know what it feels like to build it.
Yeah.
Right? Not be handed to you. And our oldest son's like, hey, this was several months ago. He says, I think I want to do HVAC. I said, well, you come back here, you start from ground zero.
Yeah.
There's not an office with your name on it.
Oh, no.
Period. So you might as well.
And he was like, okay.
Plan on that.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe in handing my kids the business, period. It's just, would it be nice if they took it over? Yeah. I mean, it'd be an easier exit for us,
Sure.
I guess, if you were. But to some degree, I want them to feel what it feels like to build it. Mm-hmm. So.
Isn't that an interesting? I wrestle with that dilemma all the time. The things I like most about myself have come from adversity and hard times. And I paid my own way through school, and I have core vivid memories of my Jeep broke down. I was cutting meat at Albertsons, and I had to walk to my shift and back, from campus, dead of winter in the snow. And I have but I loved it. It taught me that I was capable and I could do these things, and I could, provide. And I've hundreds of stories like that. But then now here I am trying to build this amazing, thriving life for my family, but also want my kids to grow up with resiliency and, determination and, confidence and all these things that I had to learn through adversity. How do you approach that? What's your balance of that? Because, by every metric, you guys are successful and you have, this amazing, you've done it. You've built an amazing life for your family, which is only a good thing. But there's those other factors of what it feels like to build something, and I don't know. It's a dilemma that I'm constantly aware of how I'm going to balance, that with my kids. And I'm curious your guys' approach to it.
Well, I think some of it too is we had that intention of we want to build this great life for our kids. And sometimes now that our kids are older, I've looked back did we actually do that? Was all the nights eating chicken nuggets at the shop because we couldn't go home because we're building ductwork? Yeah. Right? Was that the most benefit to them? The fact that we've only gone camping 10 times in their lives, was that the benefit? So it's hard to say what is it that would benefit them?
Yeah, because they got to see the grind.
Right.
My kids.
So some of them may be I'm not starting my own business because this is dumb.
That room is a playroom.
Exactly.
I literally, they're what an interesting.
Yep. And speaking of, do I want our kids in the business? I'm a little bit conflicted because I think it'll make us harder to separate. If our kids are there, we're hands-on till the day we die because that's what our kids are doing. So part of me is go fly away and have your own adventure, and we'll totally come help you in your business. But do we want to stay in for that long? So it's that there's a lot of reasons to have a business and a lot of reasons why to exit your business. Maybe that's the goal, to grow it and sell it. Obviously we've wanted to have more quality, so we've had a different version, but is that what we want forever? Or, so some of it's I don't know. Plus, getting married at such a young age, I'm like, go spread your wings. You can always come back. But
Right.
don't start here. So I tend to push them out a little more, like, get out of here, go have adventure.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But,
Which is probably healthy.
well, yeah,
Like
hopefully,
go chase your dream, and then that way, if they do end up in the business, you know that's what they wanted,
exactly.
and then that's a whole nother
Because I'm
situation.
with Steve. I don't want him to feel pressured or,
Right.
or like they don't have options.
My second oldest is very involved. I mean, he's my twin. Just everything with his hands, he can do it. He touches it, it's gold.
Yeah.
He's
You know what I
very
mean?
good at it.
And so for him, it would be a very easy walk in, right? But I even get him. I don't think so. I think so. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, you know. And so some of that, and I'm just like, dude.
Maybe there's the first franchise.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think too, something that I feel like I've learned over the years of business is at the beginning it's very defined. We're doing this, we have this mission, we're going here, we're going there. Well, as we've gotten older, it's like, I'm going to see how this pans out. Obviously, there's these key things that I want to have happen, right? Even like with our kids, like, we'll just see where this goes.
Right.
And constantly have that attitude of problem solving, having good quality. But I don't feel at least that I'm as driven to like, we have to make, this happen. To where more it's now like, I want to operate, do the things that we do well. And then as we grow, the new industries that come along, like I just want to be a little more flexible to see how all that pans out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's good or bad. I'll let you know in 20 years.
I keep trying to find my kids' owner's manuals. They didn't come with them, so
Yeah.
who knows?
They all came with different ones too.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And they're encrypted, and one of them's in
Yeah.
Braille, and it's like
One of them has AI now. It's constantly
exactly.
changing.
Yeah. Speaking of that, though, the future goals and all that. What's next for you guys? What's on the horizon? What are goals looking like?
we're building a house in Bayfield.
No way.
We are.
Congratulations.
We bought some property earlier this year.
Right on.
And so we're going to be building a house there. So
That's awesome.
That's
So is
the
that
next
is that the dream? Kind of the, I don't know. Is it what do you
Like
call
a
it? Your
little
dream
getaway,
house?
like, yeah.
Yeah.
A little getaway.
Yeah, so right after we got married, we'd drive around up here, and I've always loved southern Colorado, right? And it's just the pines are where I need to be.
You just want to hunt up here.
I just want to hunt. The property does border a whole bunch of forests.
Oh,
so
that
it's
helps too.
fantastic.
Yeah. Well,
So-
make sure that we talk after this.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's always been our dream. I mean, we've always wanted to buy a piece of property and build a house, and it's been quite the journey since we've, finding a house, a set of prints, and figuring out how big we want to do it. Well, we just want to do it small because we don't want all the kids to come back home. So, so it's going to be not a small house. So-
Great.
So when all the kids want to come for whatever holiday it is, we can house everybody in one location.
And will this be will you move there, or will it be a vacation?
Eventually,
second
that'd be
home?
the plan to make it full. I mean, we still, our youngest still has 5 more years in school.
Oh,
so-
yeah, and we want to keep them in
Right, and so we don't want to rip him out. He's into sports and stuff like that.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I like Bayfield's sports, so they
Yeah, they're
have
pretty
a
pretty good,
really
actually.
solid team. So,
So
I don't know.
maybe.
It might happen sooner
The
rather than
hunting's
later.
not too bad.
That's right. So, but yeah, I mean, eventually, I think that would be the goal is to permanent resident up here.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's so cool.
Yeah, I'm on the same. My shift has been like, I don't know what I want to do, but I just know that I want to be with my family. So I want to keep those relationships, right? Like the house that will be sufficient for everyone to come back. And it's like, that's like my whole, he doesn't know this yet, but I'm getting like a logo, like it's going to be the gathering place. Like
Yes.
that's our thing. It's going to have our Robbins Mountains, blah, blah, all the stuff. But that's for me, it's like, I just want a gathering place. I
So
just want
cool.
to retain those relationships and keep that. And we actually made it big enough that when we do business planning, our leadership team can come there.
Yeah.
So,
That's
so
amazing.
again, our life is kind of all entailed with.
Yeah, which is so
Altogether.
it's so what again another little collision of the stories. But I literally just built a logo for our townhome that we're buying in Moab.
Awesome.
Oh, nice.
It's called Red Rocks Retreat and like all this stuff. And we're gonna short term rent it, and we can't afford it on our own yet.
Yeah.
But I was talking to my wife about how special this is gonna be, that we're gonna make memories there.
Yes.
Like we're gonna make memories there, and I'm gonna make it our little sanctuary. We close on Thursday, and we're pulling the kids out of school, and we're driving down there, and like
Absolutely.
because it matters,
Yeah.
I want my kids to see mom and dad chasing their dreams. I think that's we can figure out whatever they miss at school on Thursday,
Yeah.
because we were like juggling all this stuff. But anyway, it's just cool it's so fun to see.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you both so much
This is a
for
blast. You're
being
awesome.
here.
I love talking with you
thank you
anytime.
I appreciate your guys' time so much, but I appreciate that I get to learn from you from afar and, in this context and today. And I just want to thank you guys for being such a powerful example that you can grow a big, successful, business, but do it the right way. And adding value everywhere you go, and all of the people that you've brought up with you, the homes and the families that you guys have impacted, and the lessons that you've learned, and just all of this stuff. It's so refreshing. That's the word for it. It's refreshing to sit and chat with you guys. So thank you, and keep it up. So I've got gifts for you guys.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
These are my Inspire by
Oh,
Example
yeah.
shirts,
Yay,
and I gotta
cool.
see hopefully they're the right size.
Awesome.
If not, we'll figure it out afterwards. But
Good, thank
it's because you guys are genuinely inspiring
Way
by your
cool.
example, and keep doing it because the world needs more of it. And don't change a darn thing. And thank you so much for being a force of good in this world, and for showing people that it can happen the right way, and for chasing dreams, and for sticking together and all of that stuff.
Wow,
Thank
thank
you
you.
guys so much.
Thank
You
you.
bet. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.